Hi, I'm Lori.
And I'm Kevin, and this is No Longer Ashamed.
We are survivors of childhood sexual abuse.
And we're here to share with you that if you're a survivor, you don't have to be alone.
Our logo is a salamander, and the reason is a fire salamander can survive a fire, and you have survived a fire.
We want to help you with your journey to healing and hope.
We are all survivors together, and we walk this journey together, and you are not alone.
By telling our stories, we are hoping that you will have the courage to share your stories as well and find your voice.
Because stories are so important, and for so long I know that I wouldn't tell my story, but when I finally shared my story, that's when I got my freedom.
And this is our journey and your journey to healing and hope. So come with us. So you want to talk about ants, but not the kind that crawl around in your kitchen or you find outside, but the acronym, which we're so fond of acronyms lately, which is automatic negative thoughts.
Apostrophe S, ants. And I'm a big fan of Dr. Amen. Have you heard of him?
I have now.
Yeah. So there's also Jim Fay, and Jim Fay wrote the book. Oh, I can't think of it now, but it's about raising kids, and it's about consequences. Having natural consequences. And he's paired up now with Dr. Amen, and they've revised and written it together. But Dr. Amen is who Justin Bieber went to. Do you remember that time when Justin was just a bad person? He was always in trouble. Well, I'm in the music industry, so there was a time.
I don't pay attention to Justin Bieber, I have to admit. Yeah. I'm sorry.
So he went to Dr. Amen, and he had severe ADHD. And working with Dr. Amen, he was able to retrain his brain. And so Elizabeth Smart just had worked with Dr. Amen, and he looked at her brain according to trauma. And so it was really an interesting episode. And what he talks about a lot is the automatic negative thoughts, and those come up regular, but more with trauma. And I love the way what he says when we recognize them. The first thing you do, so for me, often it's like, oh, I don't matter. Like that's one that comes up to me. Is it true?
Yeah.
No, it's not true. But if I think it is, can you know without a doubt if it's true? And it might be true. It's just making you think about it. And then how do I feel when I think that thought? Well, when I think the thought I don't matter, I feel like I don't matter. And then the fourth one is, where would you be without that thought? How would you feel? Well, if I didn't think I didn't matter, I'd probably feel like everything's okay and I matter and I'm important. And so it's a way to kind of deprogram. And although these are
last one was, how would you feel if you felt the opposite of that thought?
Yeah, or where would you be without that thought? So it's not necessarily the opposite, but if you didn't have that thought, I don't matter, I wouldn't be feeling like I didn't matter. I'd probably feel like I had some value.
Yeah.
Because most of our thoughts aren't really true. They're just things that have either been programmed, as you and I have talked about, from our childhood, or even thoughts come into our head that aren't necessarily ours. Like, have you ever had a thought where you're like, where in the world did that come from? And when we come from trauma and abuse, and we've been told that we're terrible and no one will believe us, when we've been told all of these lies, and that's one, I feel like no one will believe me.
Yeah.
Is it true? Well, no, it's not true, because somebody might believe me. It's not true that everybody won't believe me. And then, can I know without a doubt if it's true? No, it's not really a true thought.
Yeah.
So how do I feel when I think this untrue thought? Well, I feel bad. Where would I be without that thought? I'd feel like I need to tell somebody, because somebody will listen. Somebody will hear me.
And automatic thoughts, we're not always aware of them, but we're aware of the feelings. And he talks about the feelings that we have when we have them. And these are sensory feelings. These are like our body reacts, because our brain, he talks about what happens in our brain when we have these negative thoughts, these automatic negative thoughts. Our brain releases these chemicals, and it creates this reaction in our body that we feel. And so we might not even be aware of a thought, but we're aware of this reaction that we're having. You know, it makes our hands cold and sweaty, makes our heart race or so, you know, and it creates this body sensation and countering it. And he talks about how you have to do this 100 times. So, but I get it because it's like they keep kind of persisting, even though you counter it once.
Mm-hmm.
The next time something happens, we have it again. And so you have to counter it again. And this whole process is a way of you're stopping the reaction in your brain.
Mm-hmm. And it becomes a pattern. So you will automatically do that. But when you were explaining it, it's like, think about when I get triggered, I actually have, whether I have a fear or so it's the same thing. Okay, I'm having this feeling, I'm having this emotion. And what do we always say? Emotions are information.
Yeah.
So if we stop and say, what is this? And I heard somebody say, let's get curious rather than critical, because often we'll condemn ourselves. We'll have a thought, then we'll condemn ourselves. I'm so dumb, I don't matter. That's a condemnation, a criticism. And so if we get curious, which is it true? And I can say for me, I can't give you a percentage because I don't know, but most of the time it's not true.
Yeah.
An example of that is I'm from a small town, and if I go to the grocery store, I see people I know.
Yeah.
Here where I live now, I don't. In fact, if I do, it's like, wow, that was weird. But I remember when I was going through a time of estranging from my parents, and I would see someone I knew at the store, and they would turn and walk the other way. Now, they might have just remembered something they needed to get, but my mind is, oh, they hate me.
Yeah.
And so then I would have to say to myself, and that's why I know this, I've done it before. I've tried to practice it, but you know how sometimes you kind of slack off. And I'd be like, is it true? Well, yeah, it looks like they turned around and left because they saw me. But can I know without a doubt? No, I can't know for sure that he wasn't or she wasn't just going, oh, I forgot milk. And then how do I feel when I think he hates me and he ran away from me? I feel like crap. But where would I be if I just thought, oh, he forgot his milk? There would be no emotion or rejection or
no fallout from that feeling. And that's the interesting part is we don't recognize these thoughts, but when we do recognize them, that's when we go, well, wait, is it true? And it might be partially true, like you said, but is it absolutely true? Is it always absolutely true? Am I really a bad person? No, not really. But I feel like it because that person walked away and they made me feel like they don't like me. But is that the truth? Well, I don't know. Is it the absolute truth? Maybe not likely. And then you can look at it, well, if I don't feel this way about what just happened, maybe it isn't a big deal. And maybe I don't have to feel bad. Maybe I don't have to, my brain doesn't have to send these chemicals out throughout my body to make me feel like something's wrong. And that's why practicing it helps, because after a while you get that feeling and then you go, well, yeah, no, that's not really it.
And if we think about it, we do it with our family. We think, oh, they're mad at me. And then we find out they're not mad at us at all. They were short with us because they were going into a meeting and they just did a quick text.
Yeah.
And it's so easy when we come from, trauma to think, always think we've done something to upset. But then when we start doing this practice and reprogramming our brain, it's a sort of freedom. Because even when you were explaining it, when you walked through it again, I felt something like lift off me, and it wasn't even my thought. Yeah. But it was like, wow.
Yeah. And that's the key, is to recognize it, and then it's this sort of reversal almost. But what you're doing is just reversing the reaction in your brain. And that's, we talk so much about how we can change our brain.
Our mind can change our brain.
Our mind can change our brain, but it does take practice. And I recognize that I have had times, even recently, even like a week ago.
I thought you were going to say a few minutes ago.
Not that recently, but and it took me a while to recognize what had happened. And by that time, my brain had already done its due diligence and sent all these, chemicals through my body and made me feel bad for a while. And then later on, I was like, this isn't right.
Mm-hmm.
And so the key is kind of recognizing when these automatic negative thoughts pop in,
Right.
that
It's
they
like,
are an automatic negative thought.
yeah, it's first is the awareness. And, in recovery, there's this story. You're walking down the road and you fall in a hole, and it's like a, manhole or whatever. And so you try to find the path, and finally you get out. The next day you're walking down the road and you fall in the same hole because it's your way to work, but you know how to get out quicker. And the third day, you skirt around the hole so you don't fall in. The fourth day, you take a different road.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like first we become aware, and then when we're aware, and so it's even just thinking, oh, what are those thoughts? What are my automatic negative thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah.
I suck. And I found myself, I don't know about you, but there's been times when I'm like, I'm so tired of feeling bad all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so tired of always feeling like I'm, hurting someone's feelings, or I wasn't sensitive enough.
Yeah, we have our little critic going on in our head. And yeah, I can think of times even just today
Mm-hmm.
when I had this. But I think because I have practiced enough to learn that those thoughts are not necessarily true, and they're not necessarily absolute, and they're not necessarily what I have to base everything on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it feels like. It feels like at the time when you have the thought, I always screw up, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because when I looked into this and was trying to think about when this would be used for me, it feels like it is something I've practiced. And I don't know why it's become kind of second nature to me. For when I have these automatic thoughts, I automatically counter them. But somehow I've learned that
Mm-hmm.
they're not always necessarily true.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to feel that feeling just because you think that's true right now.
Mm-hmm. And I think that there is kind of a movement of affirmation. So if you go, I'm so dumb, then you go, no, I'm really smart. But I think it's even better to say, is it true?
Mm-hmm.
Because then we have to think about it. We're not just trying to trick our brain. We're actually showing our brain, yeah, it's not true.
Yeah, if you just say, the opposite, you're not really looking at why you feel that way and where it's coming from and whether it really is based on what's happening in reality of what you're going through.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you take that step, you're putting a pause on that automatic thought. It's like you're hitting the pause button. You're going, wait, I'm going to look at this first before I decide to feel this. And then you figure out where the feeling comes from.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I think feelings really do give us a lot of information. Is when we pause and look at them and kind of examine where they come from.
Yeah. Even think about this. When somebody finally tells their story and the person says, it's not your fault, the first thought I think I know that I would have is, oh, but it is, you don't know.
Or
because that's an automatic negative thought.
Uh-huh.
And
or
then just
you're just saying that to make me feel better, but you probably really are just saying that.
So a good example is when I was going to counseling for this, my first counseling. I lived on an island, so I would go to counseling, and then I'd sit in the ferry line and I'd think about what the counselor said, and I'd be like, why is she lying to me? And then it occurred to me, oh my gosh, she's not lying to me. The things she's saying, the nice things she's saying about me are actually true. And I can believe them because she says them, or I can not. And how is it going to help me to not believe them? And really, why would she lie to me? And I was coaching with somebody who's in a difficult situation, and I asked them, where would you be if you weren't in this situation? And their face lit up and they talked about all the things they'd be doing. It's a kind of a caretaker thing. And then I said, what if you were to put some boundaries around the caretaking? And the first thing was, I can't. And I said, oh, is that true? Yeah, nobody else will do it. And I go, is that true? Well, maybe I could pay someone, but that person wouldn't let someone else do it. And I go, well, then that's not on you, is it? And so she was believing this lie that because that person wouldn't accept help from anyone else, that she was the only one who could do it and had to do it.
Yeah.
And it's, and it was, I used kind of that method. And then when she thought, oh, there are options. Wait a minute, maybe but that's how abuse does. It gets us so entangled that we believe we don't have any options.
Yeah. So the steps work really well because first you ask, is this true?
Mm-hmm.
And then you ask, well, is it so? And if it's like
Can
kind
you
of
know? Yeah.
kind
Can
of
you know
true,
without a doubt? Yeah.
yeah, is it absolutely true? Is it
Mm-hmm.
true all the time? And then you kind of examine it more. And then it's how does that feeling, that thought make you feel?
Mm-hmm.
And so you're examining what's happening to your feelings because of that thought. And then you think, if I didn't have that thought, how would I feel? And that's
Yeah.
where you examine whether or not, if it's not absolutely true, do I have to feel that way?
And
And that's
even if
where
it
it
is
starts
absolutely
changing.
true, if you're in an abuse situation and you're like, he's mean to me, is it true? Yeah, I know without a doubt he's mean to me. How do I feel when I think about how mean he is to me? I feel horrible. And where would I be if I wasn't thinking he's mean to me? I would probably be away from him or her because I don't want to feel, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? So whether it's true or not, I think that it's still a really valid exercise.
Yeah. Because then you can look at your options.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have options, what they are and what you can do to change that.
And something that you always say is, for instance, if it's something that, your trauma that somebody did to you, and then you say, well, I feel bad when I think about it. Where would you be without that thought? Well, it's like it did happen, but yes, it happened. But our responsibility is our healing is our responsibility. So
Yeah.
do we want to sit in that?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
do we want to look for help or find ways to not have to feel like this all the time?
Like I'm just worthless or
Yeah.
don't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Being used, but it's a way because when we're in crisis, we can't solve problems. When we're in survival mode, we're just surviving. But when we realize we have options, then that's when we get freed up to go, oh, wait a minute.
There's
There
this
are some things I
other,
can do about
yeah,
this.
there's this other way of dealing with this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
And
that's
when we're
where the kind of the freedom comes, is looking at those other ways.
Yeah, exactly. And it maybe if you're in a controlled situation where you're being controlled, then it's a way for you to go, wait a minute. It may be scary, but I don't have to do this. It doesn't mean stay or leave, but it's like, oh, I don't just have to be the doormat. I could have boundaries. I could get help. I could talk to someone. I could tell my
Yeah.
story to someone. It's finding that place of where we don't have to suffer alone, really.
Yeah. I'm just pondering what
Mm-hmm.
it would have been like if I'd known about this a long time ago. Because I know I was being controlled by these automatic negative thoughts for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that led to my coping because of these negative thoughts, I would try to drown them with coping methods.
Yeah.
And then rather than look at them and address them and see if they really were true and if they were, what I could do about them. And if they weren't true, how did I feel if I didn't have them?
Mm-hmm.
So these methods all depend upon paying attention to them, though. And I think that's what really would have helped me, because when at the time I was having them, I would try to block them out somehow.
Yeah.
I would have them, but I wouldn't want to examine them. I wouldn't want to. I knew they were there, and I'd just be like trying to ignore them. But they were
Numb
having a
them. Yeah.
physical effect on. And that's one of the things he talks about, is it has a physical effect in your brain, because your brain releases different chemicals depending on what your thoughts are and whether they're negative or positive or inspired or depressed. And so if you don't examine them, you just suppress them, they're still having an effect.
Right. So maybe we numb them with drugs and alcohol or food or shopping or
Mm-hmm.
gambling or talking too much or, not
Yeah.
slowing down, staying busy. It's like we do all these things.
Overachieving or
Right.
yeah.
So that we don't have to take a minute and think about them. And if we could just be aware and be curious, could literally change our lives.
Yeah, I like that. Being curious. Because when we learn about these is when we get to find out where they come from and find out why we have them and whether they really are true.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, so much of it wasn't true. It was just what I was learning. And it wasn't, just the sexual abuse, but I had real verbally abusive dad and heard a lot of things he said a lot of things that were hurtful and mean, and I absorbed that.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a long time to get past those.
Yeah. And that's what we do as kids. And that's why childhood trauma is so devastating, because a kid will believe whatever an adult tells them.
Yeah. And
you're a stupid idiot, or you always mess up. Yeah.
Repeating in our lives.
Mm-hmm. And then we take it. Once they're gone, we just continue the good work for them.
Yeah. So when do you have these thoughts, and what are they, and where are they coming from? It's good to pay attention. I've somehow overcome a lot of the negative thoughts I have about myself. But when you brought up this topic and I kind of examined myself, I know they do come up at times, and even, just today. And yet somehow I've learned how to recognize them and also not believe in them entirely, and not have that physical effect.
Yeah.
Not let them kind of take over.
Yeah, because you've been committed to doing the work, and it's it's similar to a trigger. When we get triggered, what do? We look around, we go, am I safe? Yes, I'm safe. What's going on here? It's similar, but again, it's getting curious rather than doing the fight or flight, And like in my coaching, a lot of times I'll hear people say something like, oh, well, they yelled at me, like that's no big deal. No, it is a big deal. You don't have to let people yell at you. Well, yeah, I do. No, you don't. Like, we don't know what we don't know until somebody can start to reflect. And we're like, what do you mean I don't have to let them yell at me? That's a thing? Like, because we just think whatever we grew up with was normal. I had a client say to me, well, if I ever don't show up for a meeting, go check my yard, and because I'll probably be buried there. And I said, that's not something that people say. That's not something that I've ever heard before. And they're like, well, it's true. And I go, yeah, but it's not right, and it's not normal. And they were like, it was shocking to them, because they thought what they thought. They didn't even question that thought. Isn't that horrendous?
Yeah. I think being curious is so important. Just paying attention, and that's where I think it's been easier for me, is I am paying attention now more to my feelings and where they're coming from, and whether they're triggered by something or if they are a negative thought, and why I'm having them. So it does make it easier after a while. You really get used to paying attention to what's going on. But I know for a long time, there was so much going on, and I just would try and tune it out so many ways. And that just lets the stuff bounce around up there. And that's all it does, is it bounces around up there.
And when we do this, we get peace, we get freedom, and maybe something we would brew on for a whole day, we might only brew on for a half a day.
Or even just a few minutes, and then, whenever. Yeah, because that did happen to me today, and it was this thought that would have been it was an automatic thought, but it would have been one that would have dragged me down all day, and and instead I just was like, yeah, no, that's not really true, and it's not true all the time, and it isn't how I really am, so I'm over it. And it was that easy. I could just kind of see the process in my head at the time, what happened, and it just went through the process, and it was like, yeah, no, I'm over it.
Yeah.
And it makes such a difference, because otherwise I would have been dragged down by this thought all day. So we can change our brain with our mind if we pay attention to what our brain is doing and our mind is doing.
Yeah. And when we just think about just the lies that come to our head or that we hear and that we don't question for any reason, like maybe we grew up in church and we always believe a certain thing, but maybe we start going to a different church and we find out, oh, there's other ways believers believe that we start to look at. I remember a professor in college would say the most unbelievable things. And I remember asking this upperclassman, I'm like, what is wrong with him? He goes, he wants you to think. He doesn't want you to take your faith for granted. He wants you to work it out and pay attention. Why do I believe what I believe? believed? Is it in the Bible? Did I, and I think that that is just such a great rule of thumb. And it's really easy to get overwhelmed because there's so many things coming at us. So one of the things, there's this lady, Byron Katie, and she does this thing called the work. And so it is those four things, the work, but then, so for instance, maybe you're in conflict with someone and, you say, my wife should make me dinner every night. And then you say, is that true? Well, in your mind, it's true, but can you know without a doubt? Well, not really, because it's up to her. And then where would you be, or how do you feel when you think that thought, my wife should make me dinner every night? Well, I get mad because she doesn't. And then where would you be without that thought? Well, I'd probably go get a pizza. But then she takes it a step farther and she says, turn it around.
Yeah.
So my wife shouldn't make me dinner every night. And then she'll say, turn it around again. I should make my wife dinner every night. And so then it begins that problem solving. And also these beliefs we hold on to that we think.
Yeah.
Like all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait a minute. Where did that come from? My childhood. The mom cooks dinner. That's just the way it is. But that doesn't mean it's a true thought.
Yeah. It's just got some roots in wherever it came from.
Mm-hmm.
Whether our childhood, we were taught by our family, but yeah, the 5 steps. So is it true? Is it absolutely true? How do I feel when I'm thinking that thought? What if I didn't have that thought? How would I feel? And then the last one that you just talked about was, if you turn it around, how would you feel? And those, Dr. Amen talked about how you have to practice it 100 times. And that's just an example. I think you just have to practice it all the time.
Right. But that's true of anything. Whenever we're changing our life or learning a new job or whatever. I mean, we think about driving at first. Oh my gosh. And now we don't even think, now we get somewhere we're like, oh my gosh, I don't even remember making that last turn. 100 times. When we think about how many thoughts we have a day, we could probably do that in one day. 100 times.
Yeah, easily. But that's when it becomes an automatic process.
Right.
And that's kind of where I recognize generally I am most of the time now. I automatically kind of process this and I'm not as affected. And that's why it was really interesting to look at this and examine how they talk about it. And I'm trying to think of, well, how did I get to this place of knowing these automatic thoughts aren't true and the way they make me feel, and then knowing what would happen if I didn't have to feel that, because that's what happened. I mean, even today I had one of these automatic thoughts, and I just was able to recognize it and counter it. And it's so easy after a while when you've been doing it.
Yeah.
And it makes such a difference, because I know part of my crushing lack of self-esteem was from my constant automatic negative thoughts. I mean, it felt like it was just a constant onslaught of negativity. And I think part of it was also because I would try to just block them out, but they were just pressing down all the time because I wasn't examining them or anything. I was just trying to block them out, and they were just multiplying and crushing me down. And when you learn to counter them, it just becomes automatic how you do it.
And it's a great tool. It's such a good tool.
And it all starts with just recognizing when they're happening.
And
being
aware.
Yeah, all that. Yeah, just being aware, that curiosity of why am I thinking like this?
Yeah, like even going to the grocery store and maybe the cashier's rude to you, and you're like, if have trauma, we instantly think, what did I do wrong? I mean, that's just kind of and then say, well,
it's all about me. What did I do bad?
Right. What's it
wrong
true?
with me?
Right.
It's all my fault.
Yeah. And then we might get to, hey, she's having a bad day. It has nothing to do with me. Wow. Isn't that something?
Suddenly I don't feel like I have to worry about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, it was fun to listen to him. And I've always followed him, because he's expert on ADHD and I have a son with that. And so I followed his work and I just love everything he says.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that when he was talking about And I could see how ADHD would be really difficult because you're probably having a lot of thoughts kind of ping ponging around.
Mm-hmm.
And because I know I probably have ADHD or I'm very close to having ADHD. I wonder sometimes if trauma can trigger that even.
Mm-hmm.
Because,
It can, definitely. Yeah.
yeah, so.
Yeah. So let's go through it. It's Dr. Amen, and he's actually on TikTok. He does fun
Mm,
little 30-second TikTok videos almost every day. And then,
mm,
so one is it true? Can I know without a doubt it's true? And whether it's yes or no, easy answer, it's one or the other. Then how do I feel when I think that thought? And then where would I be without that thought? And then
yeah.
if you want to go farther, turn it around. That's a little harder because sometimes it's like, oh, wow, I really was.
Yeah, but I think that can be really a key to
Hmm.
examining yourself.
Hmm.
I mean, once you get past how do I feel without that thought, then if you look at the opposite way, it really makes you go, whoa. And you can explore the possibilities, so to speak. You can
Hmm.
explore, maybe I could look at this a completely different way.
Yeah.
And that's when it kind of opens it up.
Hmm.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah. Well, good work. I think this is a good time to stop and pray.
So that's it for today.
We are going to have a prayer time if you want to stick with us. If not, we believe in you.
We want to hear from you. We want to hear your stories.
If you like this podcast, please rate and review because that's how other people can find us. And we really want to spread this message.
Father, I thank you for all your blessings. And I just praise you that we know our automatic negative thoughts aren't coming from you because you don't have those negative thoughts about us. And if we just examine us from your perspective, from how you feel about us, then that would make it so much easier. Because you look at us from a completely different perspective. You see us as you created us, as what you want for us and what you want us to be able to do. And Lord, I just pray for everyone listening that they would feel what you are hoping for them and what you want for them, and they would feel the hope there that you want to bless them and want them to have a blessed life. You want to be there for them, Lord. And I just pray that this would help someone to recognize that they don't have to believe their automatic thoughts all the time, that they can question them and examine them, and from that, learn from them and learn how to change those negative thoughts, Lord. I just pray that this would be helpful for them to take time to examine those thoughts rather than just try to block them out.
Mhm.
And Lord, I just pray in your name.
Father, I thank you so much that you love us. And I know in some of my darkest times, I think God hates me. And I know that's not true. And Lord, just when I read the Bible, it says that you love us and that you care about us. And that sometimes these negative thoughts that make us feel so unworthy, then it blocks our blessing.
Mm.
Like you say that you give us blessings and that you want abundance for us. And we say, how come you're not blessing me? And sometimes it's because we have these negative thoughts that get in the way. And I pray that we will be more aware of those thoughts and that you will just show us the truth, however that is, by reading our Bible every day, by getting help, that we will really recognize what the truth is and know the truth. And in the Bible, it says you'll know the truth and the truth will set you free. And so I'm up for asking, is it true? And I just pray that you'll remind me of that every chance I get so that I can begin to change my brain and walk in that freedom and love that you have for us. And you know, Lord, I know the enemy wants to take us down and he wants us to think that you're bad and you don't love us and that we're not worthy. And those are just lies. And thank you that those are lies. They're not the truth. And what you want for us is love and peace and joy. In your son's name, amen.
Amen.